for joining me again, or if this is your first time, then welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to be drawing a boat. Surprise, surprise, I do like drawing my boats. Okay, so the first thing I want to say is obviously stay to the end because you can see the finished picture, which is nice. And also, you may have noticed that I'm suddenly drawing really quickly here, and it's not because I'm short of time. It's just that one of the things I've been thinking about with these videos is the long form video, the one where I record the whole thing. I don't tend to talk a lot when I'm drawing, obviously, because I'm in a meditative flow state. So it's quite hard to do, in some ways, to do a kind of a narrative over all the top of it. As you can see from the beginning there, I used a Fude fountain pen. It's called a Fude pen, F-U-D-E, because of the nib on it. It's a special shape of nib, and you can use it to get thin lines and thick lines. So what I did with the Fastnet rock is I held the pen one way round, and you can use the end of the nib, which is very fine, and I sketched it, and then I flipped it the other way around to get the really fat lines, and I used it to get the exaggerated lines. Now, drawing something like a boat or like a pilot cutter is sort of quite complicated, really, so I didn't necessarily want to just sketch that with the pen after I'd got the island right. So what I did is I sketched that out in pencil to get the forms and the swoops and the lines and all the curves of the boat. And then what I'm doing here is I'm going in with you see I'm using the fountain pen upside down, and that gives you your fine lines. And then once I've lined in the boat, putting a couple of people on the back there, I'll flip it over and I'll do the thick lines, but probably leave the fine lines on the rigging and the masts and things like that. These fountain pens, F-U-D-E, Fude Nibs, are quite cheap if you get them off somewhere like Amazon. The Sailor Manon and the Duke, D-U-K-E. And they're pretty good, so you can pick one up for sort of like $10, $15, something like that. And then yeah, one of the things I'm using here, I'm using a waterproof ink because obviously I'm going to be putting watercolour over the top of this, and if I used a water soluble ink it would just turn into absolute mush and you'd lose all the lines. So this is a platinum carbon black ink. So apologies here because I've missed a stage. What I've done is I've put in some 2 or 3 different colours into the sky, and then like a dry wash, like dragging the brush across this rough Khadi paper. So what I'm doing again is I'm going in with a second layer of brush work, dry brush work, on the waves. And as you can see, the brush marks get smaller as I get further towards the horizon, and that gives some perspective. So what I'd normally do is for water like this, I would use 3 levels of colour and saturation of colour. So I might even mix a little bit of more darker blue in for the waves in the foreground, or just dilute the same blue as it goes into the background, if that makes sense. I'm going to do a tutorial on just waves, I think, at some point. But just for the moment, that's how that's been roughly done. And then I've put a first layer on the island and the lighthouse, and that is just a burnt umber, I think. Okay, so then I'll probably go and put a single layer of colour on the mast and the rigging and the deck, and then look at the whole picture overall. And once you've got your one layer down, I mean obviously the sea's pretty much done there, but one layer on all the components, you can then go in and think, where do I need second layer, where do I need third layers? But if you can get the whole thing sort of covered in one layer, it gives you a good point to have a squint at it, think about levels. Squinting your eyes sometimes is a really good way of making the image go a bit blurred, and then you can see if it's pretty balanced in terms of where you want the contrast to be, where you want it to be punchy, and where you want it to sort of drift into the background. And then what I normally do is once I've put in more shadows, and I'll put in a bit more depth with watercolour, and then the final process for me is often a white gel pen or a is using a white gel pen, and then I might go in with the fountain pen. So one of the last bits of the process is looking at highlights. So that could be spray from the waves. It could be just accentuating little reflections on bits of paintwork here or on lighthouse glass or whatever. And also then I might look at the ship overall and think I could put more contrast in here. So I want some more shadows, or maybe firm some lines up. This little bit at the end actually makes the whole thing coalesce really, but it's a very personal touch. And often there's a sort of sense of danger, like you could mess it all up really. And here's my rather little pompous signature. So yeah, I do hope you enjoyed that, and if you do, there's the finished piece. There's going to be more tutorials and line and wash stuff coming up, loads coming up. So please do subscribe and like. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.